Hi, I'm Rose Martin, and we're right around the corner. Can you guess where I am? Beautiful Eggleston, Virginia, and I'm sitting in the Palisades restaurant. We're going on a journey today to learn all about the lost communities of Virginia. As you've traveled around, have you ever stumbled upon an old general store and you wondered what was going on in there years ago? Or maybe you've seen railroad tracks that seem to go nowhere, and you think, you know, at one time they were bustling and connecting communities. Well, that's what it's all about. So come on a journey with me and let's meet a woman who has traveled with an atlas across the state of Virginia, uncovering and discovering the lost communities of Virginia. She's the author of several books about local history. She's interested in preservation and sustainable design. She even finds time to explore back roads. She plays the clarinet. She makes art and is rehabilitating an historic house in the once booming town of Narrows, where she is active in helping to revitalize downtown. I think we should meet her. Terri Fisher, welcome to Right Around the Corner.
Thank you, Rose. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, well, we are so excited. And traveling into this beautiful area today, I can see why this book is such a labor of love. So you are associated with a specific part of Virginia Tech. What is it?
I work at the Community Design Assistance Center at Virginia Tech. It's an outreach center of the College of Architecture and Urban Studies. And we assist nonprofits, communities, and civic groups with their needs related to the natural and built environment. So improving that area, like with trails and parks and facade designs, things like that, interior space planning. And students provide the work, so they get to engage with the communities and provide the designs and research that we do.
Oh, how interesting. Now, did the Lost Communities book come out of a project at Virginia Tech?
It really kind of did, because most all of our projects are in rural communities, because we work for places that can't afford a private consultant, so they use us instead. And in going to all of those rural communities, we go through other rural communities. And as we did that, we would see the small communities, the towns, the churches and stores and things like that, and wonder about them and be really curious about what made them tick at one time and why they were much more vital at one time than they are today.
So what is a lost community?
It's a place that has lost a transportation mode, like, for instance, a stagecoach might not come through there, or the train might stop anymore. They may have lost a industry, like a mill or coal or something like that. Or they've just lost a way of life, so they may not be farming anymore, so you may not have the general store with the potbelly stove in the middle where everybody meets and such anymore.
Because they were hubs of all kinds of social activity.
Yes.
You would meet in a place and it was the community center, right?
Yes, yes.
So you started out with 2,600 communities. How on earth did you narrow it down to 130?
Okay, my co-author, Kirsten Sparenborg, who was an architecture intern at Virginia Tech, she was working for CDAC. She actually took the Gazetteer of Virginia, which is the big red map book. She looked at it and found the 2,600 small communities, and then she started driving. And so she took photographs of places that still had things in them, something. Because you'll drive around and you'll find places that just have a little green sign that says there's something there, and there's not really anything anymore. So she took photographs of the places that still had buildings or train track or something in there that she could see that there was still some sort of community. And then that got narrowed down ultimately by a group of professors in the College of Architecture to the 30 that we ended up with today.
And those are the ones that are included in your book?
Yes.
So when you look at a lost community, so if it's missing something, I can understand how it's lost. But I read in here that you've categorized the communities in order to further drill down a little bit so people can explore and really learn about them. Right. How did you decide, and what are those categories of communities?
Well, we just really kind of looked at the types of communities to come up with the definitions of the 7 different types. So there's gathering places. Those are places like courthouse towns where everybody came to go to court, or to, you know, you might have to file your marriage license or your land license, or, you know, all those different things in the court. And in earlier years, you probably had to stay there when you went, because it was a long trip. And on your horse, and so you might have to stay at the hotel that was there and the tavern and such. So those became gathering places. There's other things like a general store that might be in the middle of an area that is the gathering place, or a mill. There are also cultural enclaves, and those are places that are usually defined by economic class, racial divisions, culture, or religion. So like the Pamunkey Indian Reservation is included in here because they've got their own enclave,
sure.
really, in the eastern part of the state. But there's also a community, Jerome, in Shenandoah County, that was settled by German Lutherans. Or there's Almagro in Danville City, that's an African American community. So those are kind of the different kinds of cultural enclaves. There are also transportation hubs, and so those might be places that the train stopped, and that was the reason for their being there at all. It might be a stagecoach stop, or it could even be a steamboat stop, as some places in the Northern Neck are. There are also resource extraction towns. So those would be places where you were exploiting the natural resources of the area, like mining, timber, iron ore, things like that. Or, and some of those turned into company towns, where the company was actually building the entire town, the company that was doing the resource extraction.
Something like Bassett and Galax in that area?
Right, those would be, exactly, those would be company town kind of places, yeah. So even not necessarily resource extraction, but furniture building or woolen mills in Danville, that kind of.
Well, we're in such a beautiful little place right here. So in Eggleston, in this beautiful little Palisades restaurant, this wasn't always a restaurant.
No, it was not.
What's the story?
Okay, this is actually the place where our project began, because Kirsten Sparenborg was driving to another project that CDAC, Community Design Assistance Center, we call it CDAC, had, and she decided to follow the sign off of 460 here in Giles County that says Eggleston, to see what was out here. And so she came out here, and at the time this building was open as a general store still. And Gladys Dowdy ran the general store. And so Kirsten and Gladys got to talking about what the history of the place was. And this was a different sort of community that I didn't mention before, which is a resort community. At one time there was the Eggleston Springs Resort that was down by the New River.
So all of Eggleston was a resort community?
Well, yes and no. This was not here at the time. This was a resort community. But that was kind of the initial reason for it, because there was a spring here. It's called Gunpowder Springs, and in fact the gift shop next door is called Gunpowder Springs for that. And it smelled like sulfur.
And that's how it became its name, Gunpowder Springs.
Yeah.
And were they also the healing springs?
They probably did heal some here, but they're...
Because I was reading, I was fascinated what you wrote in here about the healing springs and how people would come and believe that they were going to be healed by the natural waters.
And every water of every spring is a little bit different, so they were healing different things. But yes, so that was kind of the original reason for this. And actually, if you go down by the river here, you'll see the beautiful formations in the limestone still that were part of the draw here as well. But then later on, the railroad came through here, and it came on both sides of the river, because the Norfolk and Western was on one side and the Virginian Railroad was on the other side, and that kind of brought the end to the Springs resorts because of all the noise and the smoke from the steam trains and all of that stuff. But it made Eggleston a hub for transportation in this part of the county and part of Montgomery County as well. So it kind of changed the tone of the community. So this could be a transportation hub as well as a resort community. And as I said to you before too, this community, if you pay attention, there are roads here from everywhere.
Yeah, you said, told me all roads lead to Eggleston.
All roads lead to Eggleston, yeah. So, and that's part of the reason why, is because people needed to get to the railroad.
Okay, so this, where we're sitting now, used to be the general store.
Yes, it did.
Oh, interesting. So what would it have looked like at that time?
It looked actually very similar to what it does today, because all these shelves and stuff are still here. And some of the things in here, I believe the bar actually was part of the counter from the original store, and I think actually the tables are made from something related to the store as well. So she used parts of.
And I noticed when you were talking about Eggleston, you bring a historical part into each of these little lost communities too, because I was interested to hear that Mary Ingalls Wilder walked over 400 miles and ended up close. So when you were trying to find the journey of how to tie these towns together, how did you find the information that you thought, this should go into this lost community story? This should go into this lost community story.
Yeah, I really looked up as much information as I really could, and we also spoke to people who lived here. So you'll find in the book there are a lot of quotes from people who had lived here many years and have their own experiences from living here, as well as history that they'd been told over the years. So in a lot of cases, I tried to make sure I could find out whether those things were true that they said, which
Right.
was not always easy
Sure.
to do, or
The story
actually
just
in
got
some
passed
cases
down.
they weren't true at all.
Huh.
But I did that, and then I did a lot of just research and trying to find out what the interesting nuggets were, and what also tied the history of Virginia, or these communities, to the history of Virginia and the nation and the world, really. Because there are things like the Depression of 1893, the financial panic,
Right.
that we don't really know all that much about now. But there were so many of these communities that was actually an issue, and caused either a manufacturing facility to disappear, or they decided to not mine in that one place because of this financial panic, and so they had designed an entire town and just abandoned it. You know, things like that happened that are really kind of a national sort of history.
Now, did you find that people, when they would abandon those towns, they moved to other little towns in Virginia? What happened? So then the buildings became abandoned, like we knew with the general stores or the railroads leading to nowhere. But do you have a sense from the quotes and the stories that people told you where people went or how they sustained life?
Well, in some cases, and one example actually is Mineral in Louisa County, and they had set out a plan for a community that was going to be, I think it's 52 blocks, something like that. It was really large. They were calling it Mineral City, and it was based on the gold deposits and pyrite and copper and other assorted minerals that there are
Right.
in that area. And then the financial panic came along, so they had platted out the town but not built it out yet. And so they just left. I don't know exactly where they went at that time, but the people hadn't actually built their houses yet. So when you go there now, there's only a few blocks that were built out, but you can see in places where the streets were supposed to go. And things.
Oh, sure. You know, when I was reading your book, I was fascinated that some places I didn't know of. I had no idea where they were, and then there were others which was exciting. I'm like, oh, I know where that is. I've been there. One of the examples is Paint Bank. I used to live in Craig County, so that's a really, they hold a real special place in my heart. And it's such a beautiful part of the country. And having lunch at the Swinging Bridge and being up visiting there. But what I found really intriguing was, you know, I didn't know the Native American part of that story, and then how that all fit together. What are some interesting things about that area?
Right, well, the Native American part that you're mentioning was that there was red clay on the banks of the Potts Creek that's up there, and so they used that for creating bricks and making the houses red and such like that. The mill that's up there, the original mill.
Tingler's Mill?
Yeah, Tingler's Mill. The original mill that had been there was actually the head rights for the water were bought by William Preston, who owned Smithfield Plantation in Blacksburg. So there's a connection up that way,
Which is another
interesting.
beautiful area,
Yes.
right?
Yes. But one thing that I find interesting is when you go up to Paint Bank, there's a train depot, but there's no sign of a train or anything anymore. And however, if you happen to go up to Paint Bank from Ripplemead in Giles County, you'll be following the old train bed going up there. And they used to mine iron ore in Paint Bank, and they needed a way to get it out, and that was how they connected to the Norfolk Western Railroad, was through Ripplemead. So they came down that road that comes out of there, which is the Flatway, which if you are prone to car sickness as I am, that's the best way to get up to
Exactly,
Paint Bank.
right? Exactly. Some of those twists and turns that we here in Southwest Virginia. I knew even coming here to, you know, to this, going these crosses, it's beautiful. You won't find scenery any prettier, I think, anywhere in the state. But it definitely is a little hard if you're a little nervous stomach. So when you look at calling this the Lost Communities of Virginia, we've talked a lot about Southwest Virginia, but what about other areas of the state?
We did try to cover all of the state. We didn't want to be specific to Southwest, although there certainly are a lot down here,
in our hearts.
and we're closer to it from Virginia Tech. But there are some definitely in the other parts of the state. We have one out on the eastern shore, we have some on the northern neck. So we have spread out. The stories are different over there. So one of my favorites actually is Sharps on the northern neck in Richmond County. And their story is about steamboats, because you couldn't easily get to the northern neck in the early days, and the roads were just terrible once they had them. So their road was the Rappahannock River. And they went on the steamboats to get everywhere that they needed to go, and they got everything in and out that they needed to go. Their mail, people, commodities, everything went that way. And they were more connected to Baltimore because of that, because they would go out the Rappahannock River into the Chesapeake Bay and go to Baltimore.
So I'm curious, as you've been, investigating and journeying and being an adventurer all around the state, were there any stories that surprised you when you uncovered them, that you just knew you had to get in this book to share with people?
I think that some of the stories that I found in here were some of the more difficult stories in some cases, because there were a number of segregation stories that were difficult throughout the book that were told. But I think there's a lot of exciting stories and interesting stories. Like the steamboat was interesting to me. The coal mining just turned out to be interesting to me, how the different communities were created, and how that all played through time, and that some of the early communities like Stonega and Derby, they were trying really hard to keep the labor unions out. So they were trying to be nicer and have better houses, and they were exercising social paternalism is what they called it, giving their workers a little bit extra money so they wouldn't join the unions, but then that all fell apart in the Depression. So it was kind of interesting to read those kinds of stories too, and learn more about how all of these things are worked.
Well, and that's one of the things I love about this, because it's historical, and sometimes it's narrative because of the way you have those stories and those quotes. But then it's also a photo anthology with all of the beautiful pictures that you've gone out and placed so carefully in here. And what you weave through here is so beautifully done because of the historical, the photographs, the stories of the people. And with each community, you can read a section of the book, you can go to the back and read about one, and then you can decide, where do you want to go? How are you going to get in the car and go on a little road trip to discover some things? And you've got some ways that people can do that.
Yes, we had a number of people that were actually visiting the communities based on the book, and so we decided to start creating some driving tours of places. And so we started with the Southern Driving Tour, which is in Southside Virginia. It's the Halifax, Pittsylvania, Charlotte, Campbell, and Appomattox counties. And then we moved on to this area. So the Back Roads of Southwest Virginia tour guide goes into Montgomery, Pulaski, Carroll, and Wythe counties. And what we try to do is give people some roads that they should drive on, that are back roads, that are safe back roads, because there were some that I drove on that you wouldn't want to send anybody on. They were beautiful. And point out where the historic and interesting places are on those roads as they go, and give them information about stopping at some of those historic places and such.
So these are actually maps. We're not pulling out our smartphone.
No,
we're not doing this digitally, right? We're using a map, and we are just on a track across Virginia.
Right.
Oh, how exciting!
Yes.
How exciting!
Yes, we had plans to try to do them in the on the smartphone, but one problem with that is you would need to download it before you left, because there's a lot of these places that don't have cell phone coverage.
That was going to be my question, because you go out and you're riding around and you check your phone, and it's a good time to just put it away.
Right.
Put it in your pocket, leave it in the glove box, because you're not going to have service anyway.
Right.
And sometimes just look outside,
yes.
And just appreciate how beautiful it is.
Yes, and there are so many beautiful places in those, because I was the one that actually drove around and figured out the tours for the back roads of Southwest Virginia. I drove all over these counties, and it was just amazing.
I bet.
There were some amazing roads that you wouldn't believe were out there, and then but they were beautiful.
And you're like, I'm not sure this is a road.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to send other people out there, but they were beautiful. And then the ones that we've chosen for this are good roads that give you a good feeling for what the counties are like.
So when I was looking at these maps and I'm trying to figure out where would be a place to go, we know that seasonally in Virginia there are places you go and then you might not go. The beautiful dogwoods, the beautiful trees coming out in spring. Do you have a favorite location that you like to get behind the wheel and just go and visit?
Well, I actually like to drive around in the mountains.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, they're really quite beautiful any time of year. And I think today was actually a really good example because there's no leaves on the trees, but there was incredible views off into the mountains with the snow on the top and such.
Same thing driving through there. And I
Yeah.
was also thinking, I don't ride motorcycles, but I thought for people who like to get out on bicycles or motorcycles,
Right.
that I can see why it would just be so amazing to
Yes.
just ride around and enjoy that. And plenty of places to picnic,
Yes.
plenty of places to take great shots.
Right.
So if you've got a camera, you're a photo enthusiast,
Right.
that would also be something to be able to do, along with wildlife, right?
Yes.
Nature, birds,
Right.
so many things to see and visit.
Hiking and stuff too as well, so yeah.
There's no reason to stay inside.
No,
And
not
we
at
definitely
all.
all need to put our phones away, right?
Yes.
Pop it away and go out and enjoy the beautiful lost communities of Virginia.
Yes.
Some that are thriving and some that are coming back.
Absolutely.
Just like this little restaurant, right?
Yes,
That was
yes.
once a general store, to be able to come back and sit here and have a meal and look around and think, wow.
Yeah, it has great atmosphere.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
it sure
history.
does.
You can feel the history here.
This is obviously such a passion for you. Why is it so important?
Well, I think it's important to me because we have so much history around here, and we really just a lot of times just talk about, especially here in Virginia, the eastern part of the state and
Right.
what happened over there in Jamestown and Williamsburg and Richmond and places like that. And really there's so much history in each small community, and each one is different in some way. And it really helps connect you to the place that you live.
And that's important, right? To be
Yes.
connected
Yes.
where we live and within our communities. So what would you like people to take away from this book? What would you like them to do?
I would like you to be curious.
Okay.
I would like everybody to be curious about the places that they live, learn more about them, because you just never know what's going on there, what has happened there, what the history is, how it connects to the larger world, because you really are just kind of in your own little microcosm, you feel like, but really that you're in the larger world and your history in your community connects to that larger world. So I think it's important to be curious. And
So I'm curious. Will you read a passage for us?
sure.
All right.
Glad to.
So one of the things going through the book, I was trying to think, gosh, what would I read if I had a chance to
Yeah.
share with people a little bit about this? So let's see what you picked.
I picked something from the epilogue here. No place is stagnant. Things are always in a constant state of motion. Sometimes the motion may be slow, as in the shifting sands of a desert, but other times the change can be much quicker, as in the collapse of the World Trade Center. Change is generally slower, but still measurable in the lost communities of Virginia. Some of the residents interviewed has passed away in the intervening years, taking with them their memories of people, places, events, and times past. While the loss of a storyteller may not be visible to outsiders, it creates a hole in the fabric of the continuity of the place. That person's perception of the community is lost. Family members may be able to recite some of the stories, but their own personal life experiences and perspective make the remembering and the telling of the story different than that of the original storyteller and of the person who originally experienced the event. More obvious to the outsider is the loss of businesses, buildings, railroad tracks, fields, and other visible signs of community. As these visible reminders of community are lost, newer residents and those passing through are less aware of the place that once was. They may see a collapsing building, but they don't see the people who once frequented the store, sat around its pot-bellied stove gossiping and playing checkers, and visited with friends on its porch steps. They don't see the busy Saturday nights when everyone came to town in their wagons or new cars to shop for the week and catch the nickel movie. They don't see the trainloads of coal and lumber, the tomato and oyster canneries running at full tilt, the tobacco markets in action, or the bustle of harvest time. Missing are the children walking to the one-room school, the girls working for weeks sewing a new dress, and their mothers cooking for days in preparation for the big August meeting, and the men bartering as they wait in line at the grist mill. Missing is the sense of excitement that permeated the town when the train or steamboat delivered news, mail, and people, when traveling entertainers visited, or when court was in session. Also missing are the hard times that residents faced during the Civil War and the Depression, because their skin was a different color or they spoke a different language, and from their long, physically exhausting workdays. Many of the places highlighted in lost communities of Virginia have changed perceptibly since we visited, some negatively and some positively. The Pocahontas Company store collapsed, the automobile garage at Capeville was razed, buildings at Manita and Mendota have been overgrown with trees and vines. But triumphs include Boydton's downtown revitalization, Paint Bank's reinvention as a tourism destination, the reopening of Eggleston's store as the Palisades restaurant, the guarantee that Pamplin's pipe kiln will remain a protected archaeological site in perpetuity, and the restoration of Woodford's train station in one of the neglected homes in Sharps. Each change ushers in a new phase in the history of the community. While the original boom times are lost, a new prosperity can be invented. In Paint Bank, for example, outside speculators once came in to exploit the natural resources of iron and timber. Today's prosperity comes from tourists wishing to enjoy the natural resources of the mountains, forests, and trout streams. Natural resources remain the draw, but the intent is different. Each of the lost communities moves forward, some with a more defined future than others.
Wow, I can feel that. I'm so sorry that we are out of time. I know my curiosity is sparked, and I can't wait to get on the road. I think Virginia Tech is very lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. So thank you so much. Special thanks to Terri Fisher for sharing her work, Lost Communities of Virginia. I hope you're going to get on the road, and you never know where I'm going to see you next, right? Because as we all know, I'll see you next time right around the corner.